I knew something was off the moment I saw the calendar invite. It was a Wednesday morning, the kind where the coffee hits just right. The inbox is manageable, and you feel briefly like you're in control. Until that little red dot appeared in the corner of my screen. Urgent, strategy org alignment, 10:30 a.m., sent by HRCC'd with the Chief Marketing Officer, who also happened to be dating Summer, the girl who joined us 6 weeks ago from an events agency. I clicked the invite twice. No agenda, just a room number. That's never a good sign. Still, I didn't panic. I was the head of strategy. I'd built this team from scratch. We weren't perfect, but we doubled lead conversion in Q2, landed 2 cross-market partnerships in less than 5 months, and cleaned up the chaos that existed before I took the role. I walked into the meeting room at 10:28. Our HR director, Emily, was already there, sitting stiffly with a company-branded folder. The CMO strolled in a minute later, smiling too wide, too fake. Then Summer walked in. That's when my stomach dropped. She didn't sit down. She stood by the whiteboard trying to look casual, like she wasn't entirely sure why she was even there. Her badge still had the temporary red border, but that didn't stop what came next. Emily cleared her throat and began reading off a sheet like she had practiced it 20 times. As part of our restructuring initiative, we're realigning strategic leadership to better support cross-functional integration. I didn't even flinch. I'd heard corporate speak before. I knew exactly what was being said. I was being replaced. By the time Emily got to the words effective immediately, I had already stopped listening. My brain was buzzing too loud to hear. I looked at the CMO. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Summer. She gave me a tight, awkward smile, like this was just as uncomfortable for her as it was for me. But it wasn't, not really. She was about to be handed something I'd bled for. She had no idea what this role demanded, and I was being told I could transition into an advisory position, reporting directly to her. Advisory. I wasn't even angry, not at first. I nodded slowly. I remember saying, "Thank you for the update. I'll need a copy in writing." Emily blinked, surprised. I think she expected tears, a breakdown, something they could label emotional instability. But I wasn't unstable. I was calculating. They thought they had pulled a clean coup. They thought this was checkmate. What they didn't realize is that I was still on the board. Back at my desk, I cleared out my personal items, not because I was leaving, but because I didn't want anyone else packing them for me later. I kept it clean, professional, smiling even. One of my team members walked by, concern written all over her face. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. "Everything's just beginning," I replied. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't vent to friends or spiral into wine and takeout and doom scrolling. Instead, I opened my work laptop and accessed the internal project database. Summer wouldn't find much in there. I had built most of our strategy architecture through my own Notion and Airtable ecosystems. Custom dashboards, behavioral tagging filters, tiered outreach pipelines that took me 2 years to design. And none of it was documented in any official onboarding deck. I didn't hide it maliciously. I hid it because no one had asked, and because I'd been burned before by someone else who stole credit for my work. So this time I kept my kingdom behind a password. Let them restructure. Let her take the title. She had no map, and I had all the keys. I took screenshots of every critical file, exported timestamps, re-downloaded proof of deliverables. I wasn't planning revenge, not yet, but I was preparing for something far more dangerous, Patience. Because if there's one thing I've learned in corporate life, it's this: you don't always have to strike back. Sometimes you just have to let the wrong person fail. And Summer, she was about to fail beautifully. Summer took over on a Thursday. By Friday, she had already broken the client segmentation model. She didn't mean to. In fact, I'm pretty sure she had no idea what she was doing. She thought the lead tiers were just pretty color codes on a dashboard. She removed the red label from Tier 1 accounts because, in her words, red feels negative. Let's make it gold instead, except that label wasn't cosmetic. It was part of a conditional formula that triggered alerts across the pipeline when certain engagement thresholds were met. Without it, the system went blind, but I said nothing. I watched from the sidelines as she slowly dismantled the framework I'd spent 2 years building, a framework developed after dozens of failed outreach campaigns. hours of user interviews and more spreadsheets than any human should admit to creating. She started changing language in our email templates. Too formal, she said. She replaced subject lines like strategic alignment review, Q2 projection discussion with quick chat. I remember sitting in my smaller, now windowless office, watching the open rates drop by 17% in 2 weeks. Semia. She shifted the structure of our outbound decks, removing the slide about long-term ROI, modeling the one that always got decision-makers leaning forward in meetings. That slide's too technical, she told someone. Let's be more vibes forward. Vibes forward. This is what we were becoming. Within the first month, 3 of our mid-funnel accounts ghosted us. A prospect in Denmark, someone I had personally brought through a 6-month nurturing cycle, sent an email saying, "Apologies, but it's clear your team's priorities have shifted. We'll be pursuing other partnerships." I didn't respond. It wasn't my place anymore. But I logged the date, the timestamp, the lead ID, the original touchpoint, the change in communication style, the loss. I logged everything. They didn't notice I was tracking the downfall. They still looped me into team calls sometimes, awkwardly, almost like a formality. Summer would glance at me sideways, waiting for me to validate her strategy, but I never said much. I didn't need to. Reality was speaking loud enough. I was there when she tried to walk into a client alignment call with just a 1-page Notion doc and some Canva slides. The client, a German logistics firm, asked for projected savings over 12 months and a risk analysis if implementation stalled. Summer blinked. Then she said, "I don't have that data on me, but I can follow up." That data was in the original appendix I used to present in every deck. She had deleted it for cleaner formatting. They didn't renew the contract. By month 2, she started calling more meetings. I call them control meetings. The kind where the insecure leader pulls everyone into a room not to solve problems, but to remind you they're in charge. She'd ask vague questions like, "How do we make this more scalable?" and then nod at any answer that sounded buzzwordy. Once she turned to me directly and said, "You used to lead these." Any advice, I smiled and said, "Trust the system." She laughed, but I meant it, because she wasn't trusting anything. Not the data, not the sequence, not the strategy. She was reacting. And companies that run on reaction, not rhythm, bleed slowly until they collapse. I want to be clear, I didn't want her to fail. Failure isn't satisfying when it costs jobs, clients, reputations. But I also wasn't going to save her from herself. Not after the way they handed her my seat like it was a party favor. In quiet moments, I look back at the earliest days. When I first joined, there was no structure, just chaos and ideas. I built every piece like a puzzle, not perfect, but purpose-driven. Lead scoring based on behavioral indicators, predictive outreach flows using seasonal data, cultural nuance playbooks for EU, MENA, APAC clients, risk escalation paths built directly into CRM. Even a Slack bot I wrote with a friend in DevOps that pinged reps before they missed a follow-up. And they stripped it all for the vibes. At week 10, a senior partner from Spain emailed directly to the CEO. His words were brutal. "Your team used to speak strategy. Now they speak trend." That email got forwarded a lot. I wasn't copied, but I saw it. Because the same CEO called me into his office the next morning. He didn't apologize. He didn't even mention Summer. He just said, "If you were still in that seat, what would you do differently?" I looked at him calmly. I wouldn't have given it away to someone who hadn't earned it. Then I stood up and walked out, because I knew something he didn't. They hadn't just promoted the wrong person. They'd quietly built a bomb, using all my discarded wiring. And all I had to do was wait. The first deal to fall through was one we thought was a sure thing. It was with a logistics AI firm in Helsinki. Smart team, sharp founders, notoriously cautious. We'd spent 5 months bringing them through our funnel. I'd written every word of the original pitch. I'd flown to Finland twice. They asked detailed questions. They respected facts. They didn't tolerate fluff. Summer sent them a thank you deck, literally. That was the subject line, "Thank you. Let's build the future together." The deck had gradient sparkle fonts and 6 bullet points about synergy. No financials, no implementation roadmap, no KPIs. They went dark for 3 weeks. Then one of their co-founders replied with a single line, We've decided to pause further discussions. Thank you, no feedback, no call, just silence. Summer told the team they had timing issues. I wrote nothing. I just opened my personal log and added one more row. Then came the Australian distributor. That deal was mine from the beginning. I'd connected with their COO during a virtual roundtable 2 years prior. We'd built it from scratch, late-night calls, custom integrations, trial periods. They were finally ready to commit to a long-term contract, until someone on our side sent them the wrong version of the SLA. It was missing the updated liability clause. They asked for clarification. Summer responded with a one-line email. Hey, just use the doc attached to this. It's all good, except it wasn't. They withdrew that same afternoon. I heard the news while refilling my tea. Another line added to the log. By month 4, it was becoming routine. Every Monday morning meeting opened with an explanation for what had gone wrong. It's the market. It's client fatigue. It's too many options. It's not us, except it was. It was exactly us that no longer understood its own foundation. I watched it play out like a slow-motion demolition. Every screw I had tightened, every structure I had stabilized was now coming undone, and they had no idea where the creaks were coming from. It wasn't just the deals, it was the people too. The younger strategists started whispering in hallways. One of them asked me quietly, "Is this how things were run?" Before I shook my head. No, before we had a plan. They looked relieved and afraid, like maybe they weren't crazy, like maybe the ship really was sinking. Then one morning, I opened my inbox and saw a meeting invite titled Q3 Rescue Deck, Emergency Planning. The sender, Summer. It was her Hail Mary. The body of the email was full of spin. Let's collaborate on an all-hands presentation to the board about our growth pipeline. Need everyone's insights. It was vague, desperate, and fake. This wasn't about insights. It was about survival. She was scrambling to patch a sinking strategy with marketing fluff, and she needed the people she once demoted to help her do it. That same week, the CMO began showing up to more meetings. His body language had changed. Less swagger, more tension. His jokes landed flatter, his eye contact flickering. He pulled me aside after one call. "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay?" I tilted my head. "Why wouldn't it be?" He hesitated. "It's just, you've been kind of quiet lately." I smiled slow and sharp. "That's intentional." He laughed nervously. "I didn't." By the end of the month, we had lost 4 key accounts and 2 top strategists had quit. Both had cited lack of leadership clarity in their exit interviews. The whispers got louder. And for the first time since this all began, Summer looked afraid. Not publicly, she still held her posture, in team calls still used. Her Pinterest vocabulary still signed emails with "let's go." But her eyes, they flickered now, toward me, toward the floor, toward the door, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then the board called a special session. That's when things shifted. It wasn't a firing, not yet, but it was a signal. Summer and the CMO were invited to provide clarity on strategy attrition. And for the first time, I wasn't just CCD, I was invited by name. The CEO added me himself. No explanation, no comment, just my name in the thread. I clicked accept. Then I reopened the last 6 months of notes, metrics, timestamps, account losses. I didn't know exactly what I'd say yet, but I knew this. They thought I was too quiet to be a threat. But silence isn't weakness. It's what happens when a storm is holding back, just long enough to choose where to strike. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. It wasn't a full quarterly review. Those happened with slides and catered coffee and awkward small talk. This was something else, a strategy assessment. Translation, someone's in trouble, and everyone wants to pretend it's still salvageable. I arrived 10 minutes early, not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I wanted to see who looked nervous when I walked in. It was Summer. She was already seated, tapping her pen against a stack of papers she clearly hadn't read. Her blazer looked too stiff, like someone else had picked it out for her. Her smile cracked the moment she saw me. Next to her sat the CMO, eyes glued to his phone, pretending this was routine. Then the CEO walked in, no greeting, no expression. Just a curt nod in my direction before taking his seat at the head of the table. One by one, the board members joined. No one asked why I was there. They didn't need to. The first question came from Marta, one of our longest-standing board advisors, sharp as glass and twice as cold. Let's get straight to it. The numbers show a 28% drop in high-quality leads over the last 2 quarters. That's unprecedented. What happened? Summer sat up straight. We've been experimenting with more conversational positioning. Less technical, more relatable. We're adapting to changing market tones. She said it like a TED Talk. I almost respected the performance. But then Marta asked, and how has that been received by client silence? Then the CEO turned to me. You've worked with most of these accounts before. Any observations? My voice didn't shake. Yes, clients didn't want us to be more relatable. They wanted us to be more reliable. And they're not seeing that. I didn't look at Summer, but I felt her shift in her seat. The CMO cut in voice louder than it needed to be. With all due respect, our repositioning was a team decision. It wasn't a solo choice. I nodded slowly. That's true, but the execution was solo and selectively informed. Then I opened my folder. I didn't bring a PowerPoint. I didn't need animations, just data. Printed loss reports, email threads, campaign analytics, time-stamped errors, all with 3 common denominators. The change in strategy language, the removal of core client materials, the lead sign-off coming directly from Summer's credentials. Marta raised an eyebrow. Did you approve these changes Summer swallowed? Well, some of them were made collaboratively, I cut in, calm, measured. None of them were recorded in the shared change log. None were tested against historical benchmarks. None were reviewed by the analytics team. Another board member leaned forward. Then how did they pass? I tapped the final document in the stack. They didn't pass. They bypassed. Silence fell. Not uncomfortable, just revealing. Like when a wound finally gets enough air to sting. Summers started to speak, but the CEO raised a hand. Then he looked at me. If you had been in charge this quarter, what would you have done differently? I met his eyes. I wouldn't have tried to rebrand a trust-based business as a trend-based campaign. I wouldn't have optimized for likes when we needed loyalty. I wouldn't have replaced strategy with sentiment. Then I let it hang, not because I needed applause, but because I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd let happen. The CMO cleared his throat. Look, we've made mistakes, but this isn't about pointing fingers. It's about fixing the future. I didn't flinch. Fixing the future starts by admitting where it actually broke. Marta glanced at the CEO. I want a full audit of process changes, personnel decisions, and all signed-off deliverables in the past 6 months. No spin, no summary, just facts. The CEO nodded finally. We'll begin today. Summer's hands trembled as she reached for her pen. The CMO exhaled through his nose, and I just closed my folder. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. Because this wasn't revenge. This was just gravity, and they were finally feeling the pull. That evening, I got a message from the CEO, just one sentence. Thank you for speaking plainly. We'll be in touch soon. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because now I wasn't the one circling the fire. I was the one standing at the center, watching it light up the path to whatever came next. It started with a message from legal. Subject line, urgent client contingency request, Frankfurt. I opened it, thinking it was another fire to watch from a distance. But it wasn't a fire, it was a flare. A signal flare, and it had my name on it. The email was short, just a forwarded request from our German partners at Baumann Tech, a client we'd spent nearly a year courting. The one whose 6.8-meter multi-year contract was supposed to close next week. The message from their side said, due to recent changes in your internal structure, we request that Lily Tanaka return to the negotiation table. Otherwise, we will need to reassess the relationship. There it was. No corporate tone, no polite phrasing, just a clear demand. Me or no deal. I stared at the screen for a full minute, heart steady. Baumann Tech wasn't just a big account. They were a signal to the market, the kind of win that opened doors in 3 other regions. And they didn't care about titles. They cared about trust, delivery, continuity. Things that couldn't be faked in Canva decks or Slack slogans. The CEO called me within the hour. He didn't waste time. Can we talk? I said yes. He didn't ask how I was, he just got to it. Bauman Tech won't move forward without you. I'd like you to return to lead this. I let the silence breathe for a beat longer than he expected. I wasn't aware I'd officially left, I said evenly. He sighed. You know what I mean? No, I replied. I don't. Clarify it for me. That's when his tone shifted. Less executive, more human. This isn't about politics anymore. It's about saving the deal. You're the only person they trust to do that. And frankly, so do I. There it was. Not an apology, but a pivot. I agreed to return with conditions. Autonomy over the deal, full authority to rebuild the negotiation flow. No interference from Summer, the CMO, or anyone tied to the failed approach. A written agreement restoring my senior strategic role retroactive to the day I was removed. No advisory caveats, no gray lines. The CEO didn't argue. He just said, send it in writing, we'll make it happen. When the internal memo dropped the next morning, no one said a word. But the message was deafening. Effective immediately, Lily Tanaka will lead all remaining Bauman Tech negotiations and execution strategy. Please route all communications through her directly. No mention of Summer, no CC to the CMO. Just me, back in the chair. But this time I wasn't sitting where they left me. I was sitting where I chose to return. In the war room, I found the project folder a mess. Docs mislabeled contract versions, mixed up CRM entries half-filled. No structure, no logic, just scattered notes and blind optimism. I spent 48 hours cleaning it up. I rebuilt the timeline. I restored the original solution matrix. I rewrote the value proposition. I annotated the cultural considerations line by line in German, not because I needed to impress them, but because I knew they expected professionalism, not shortcuts. I wasn't proving anything. I was just finishing what I started. The team looked at me differently now, not with pity, not with deference, with relief, as if someone had finally turned the lights back on. A junior strategist whispered, I never deleted your training decks. I just hid them. I smiled. Smart move. The day of the Bauman Tech call, I wore black. Not as a statement, but as armor. Summer passed me in the hall and gave me a brittle smile. I didn't return it. Not because I was cruel, but because we weren't in the same world anymore. She'd played dress-up in my chair. Now she was watching me reclaim it. At exactly 2:00 p.m., the Bauman Tech team logged on. I greeted them in German. Their COO smiled. Ah, there she is. We didn't talk about the past 6 months. We didn't mention Summer or confusion or spin. We talked deliverables, timelines, scalable growth. I answered every question before they finished asking. At the end, their CEO nodded and said, Contract draft to be sent by Friday. Please ensure your name is on it. I ended the call, exhaled slowly, and looked out the window, not for effect, but because I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be trusted again. A week after Bauman Tech signed, I was called into a meeting room labeled only C3. It wasn't on my calendar. The invite came via Slack, private, from David Healy. Senior Compliance. Hey, need your help validating something for audit. 15 mins. That's never just 15 minutes. I went. The room was small, clean, and cold. David sat with a laptop open. Next to him, an external monitor showing 3 tabs: finance, CRM, and email logs. You're not under review, he said immediately, but you're connected to some documents we've flagged. He clicked open a travel expense file from 6 weeks earlier. Line item client meeting, Milan, Italy, $8,960, a hotel, airfare, car service meals. Approved by Summer, submitted by CMO's assistant. We cross-checked our CRM, no clients in Milan, no campaigns scheduled, no pitches planned. Did you sign off on this? He asked. Never even saw it, I said. He nodded. That's what we thought. Then he opened a second file. Subject Eastbridge. Final contract draft. It had my name listed as the author metadata looked legit, but I'd never seen that version. A critical clause client performance guarantee cap had been deleted. Quietly. No version history in our contract management tool. The file had been uploaded directly from a shared drive and emailed out using a generic strategy alias. Check the timestamps, David said. I looked. The file was uploaded at 11:42 p.m. on a Friday from Summer's laptop, using login credentials linked to the assistant. IP address CMO's apartment. He didn't have to say anything more. It was coordinated. We wouldn't have caught it if Baumentech hadn't flagged inconsistencies in the version history, David continued. Triggered a full audit of contract flows. We're now seeing 7 cases of document irregularities, all involving shared access points and devices tied to the marketing office. I stayed silent. He studied me for a second. Did you know this was happening? No, I said quietly, but I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't prove it. He nodded. Now you don't have to. Later that day, the audit report expanded. Summer's badge access was pulled. The assistant who submitted the Milan trip was suspended. The CMO was placed on administrative leave quietly, but effectively cut off from systems. The announcement to staff used neutral language. In the interest of transparency and operational integrity, a cross-departmental audit is underway. Access may be temporarily adjusted, but inside the walls everyone knew. The whisper became a roar. By Friday, I received a forwarded internal memo flagged confidential. It summarized the preliminary audit findings, 6 instances of falsified contract metadata, 4 unauthorized budget approvals routed through junior accounts, 2 travel reimbursements tied to non-existent client meetings, and a pattern of deliberate misrepresentation of leadership signatures, including mine. All roads led back to Summer's machine, the CMO's assistant, private Gmail accounts connected to their home IPs. I didn't say a word, not to legal, not to finance, not even to the CEO. I didn't have to, because finally, for once, the system was doing its job. That weekend, I opened my personal notebook, the one where I'd logged every missed call, changed deck-shifted file. I turned to the last page and wrote, "They didn't just lie to clients. They lied to the company, and they used my name to do it." I underlined it twice. The next Monday morning, I was copied on an email from audit to the executive committee. Subject Stage 3, escalation. Recommendation, formal ethics review. That meant one thing. They were done asking questions. Now they were writing conclusions. The Monday after the ethics escalation, the company felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just watchful. People held doors longer than usual. Paused conversations when I passed, avoided eye contact not out of guilt, but out of calculation. They were all waiting to see what I'd do next, so was I. So, the CEO called me into his office at 9 a.m. sharp. He didn't waste time. "Thank you for your cooperation." During the audit, he said, voice low, eyes tired, "The board's reviewing everything. There'll be consequences, formal ones. We'll be making public-facing changes soon." I said nothing. He leaned forward. "In the meantime, I want to ask if you're willing to formally resume the role you were originally appointed to head of strategy, retroactive to Q2. Authority reinstated." I took a breath, then I answered calmly, "No." He blinked. "No, not like that," I clarified. "I'm not stepping backward into a role you once gave to someone else who didn't earn it. I'm stepping forward, on my terms." I slid a folder across his desk, my conditions. Inside, new title director of strategic systems with cross-departmental access, direct reporting line to the executive committee, not through marketing, rebuilding authority to restructure the strategy, org team tools protocol. And lastly, a permanent audit trail system across strategic documents signed into policy. No ambiguity, no wiggle room, no room for another summer. He flipped through the pages, reading silently. No reaction, just slow breathing. Then he nodded once. "You've thought this through." "I've lived it through," I replied. "This company can't survive another blind spot like this, and I refuse to be part of a system that rewards loyalty to power over loyalty to integrity." He leaned back. The pause felt heavy. Then he said, "You're right." Then he signed. The announcement went out 48 hours later. No emojis, no team spirit quotes. Just a single message in all hands. Effective immediately, Lily Tanaka will assume the position of Director of Strategic Systems. Her mandate will include restructuring documentation reform and cross-functional transparency protocols. No one clapped in Slack. But the private messages started rolling in, from product managers, from dev leads, from 3 people who had resigned quietly in the last year. "You finally broke the loop. They should have listened earlier. You just gave the rest of us permission to stop playing dumb." I didn't reply to most of them. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because I didn't come back to be liked. I came back to make sure no one else had to be quietly erased. The following week, I met with legal to begin drafting the new internal policy for contract metadata integrity. No more shared drives, no more single-user edits, version control through immutable logs, authenticated sign-offs only. I created new onboarding for junior strategists, not just how to pitch, but how to protect their work. I reintegrated our regional playbooks, restored the risk matrices, and rebuilt the logic of the sales funnel Summer had trashed. One night, I stayed past 9 p.m. rebuilding the API dashboard logic we once used to track lead quality. A developer noticed. "You don't have to do this yourself anymore," he said. I smiled. "I know, but I need to." And what of Summer gone? No formal goodbye, no moving on post, just silence. The CMO placed on indefinite leave pending review. His name hasn't appeared on any approvals since. One of the younger team leads pulled me aside in the break room. "How do you stay so calm?" I looked at her. "Because I don't need to get even. I just need to get it right." The day I officially moved into my new office, I opened the window and stood quietly. Not in triumph, in relief. Because I hadn't just survived what they tried to do. I'd reshaped what came after. My new office isn't the biggest. It's not the one with the skyline view or the private espresso machine, or the door that used to stay shut all day, so no one could see how little got done inside. But it's the office I chose, and that's all that matters now. The plaque on the door still said temporary. HR said they'd fix that within the month. I didn't rush them. I'd waited long enough for this seat. Another few weeks didn't matter. The first morning I moved in, I came in early, not to decorate, not to show off, but to sit, to feel the chair, to look at the walls, to remember that 6 months ago, I was escorted out of a meeting room so someone else could sit here. Someone who thought power was a shortcut. Someone who didn't know that real leadership, comes from building something, not borrowing it. I stared out the window, the morning sun crawling across the carpet, and I remembered every detail, the way I smiled when they demoted me, the email I never sent, the calls I never answered, the documents I rebuilt in silence. The moment they realized I hadn't left the system, I was the system. Somewhere out there, Summer was rewriting her resume. The CMO was likely negotiating the softest possible exit. The board was still in cleanup mode, issuing policy clarifications and reinforced ethics protocols like digital bandages over real wounds. Let them. I had work to do. I didn't win because I outsmarted them. I didn't win because I yelled the loudest. I won because I waited, documented, endured, executed. Because I knew, when you build something from scratch, no one can truly replace you. They can sit in your chair, but they'll never know where the bolts are. A few weeks later, I was walking past the old conference room, the one where they'd introduced Summer with a fake smile and empty words. It was empty now. The door ajar, the chairs stacked. I paused, just long enough to take in the silence. That room had seen arrogance, politics, power games. But it had also seen me at my lowest, yes, but also at the very moment I chose not to fight for a seat, but to fight for my name. That was the moment everything turned. Not when I came back, not when I closed the deal, not even when the audit landed. The moment was when I walked out calmly and refused to beg, because that's when I stopped playing their game and started writing my own. Now I sit where he once did, but I don't wield control the way he did from behind closed doors. I open mine, I answer questions, I ask harder ones. I don't build empires, I build trust. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in infrastructure, in making sure the next time someone like me walks through these halls smart, underestimated, unafraid, they don't get buried under the weight of someone else's insecurity. They get heard, they get space, they get credit, they get what I had to take the long way to earn. And if I have to keep sitting here making sure that happens, then I'll stay as long as it takes. Because this time, I didn't get the seat. I became it.